I stood before the mirror in the boutique quietly, but my heart was screaming. I held a pale lavender dress to my chest, feeling its soft silk cool against my skin, and thought, if I wear this, will she know I'm missing at her side? She's going to be beautiful, the shop assistant said, adjusting the dress on its hanger. I nodded, even though every smile felt borrowed. I had come here because May looked at me with hope the morning she asked for my help, and I had told her I'd be there, though by there I meant behind the scenes. I would give, as always. But this time, I wore the gift. When she told me not to say I was her mother at the wedding, I almost dropped the dress on the floor. I'd never heard words nip like frost at dusk. Don't tell anyone you're my mom. She said it so softly, I thought I'd misunderstood. So quietly, but with that cold certainty. She'd already meant it. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I asked, where should I sit then? She didn't answer, just looked away, and the dress slipped from my fingers. The shop assistant cleared her throat. It's lovely on you. I turned to the mirror. There, beyond my reflection, I remembered the little girl who used to clutch my hand, the teenager who confided every secret in my tired kitchen, the mother who'd found safety in my arms. All those layers of love, built in quiet evenings and patchwork emergency plans, had one final test ahead. The dress fit, not too tight, not too loose. I touched the neckline, smoothing it. I paid for it with the account May provided, transferred with an efficiency that felt as distant as satin on glass. Walking home, I imagined her wedding day, pastel bouquets weighed with dew, laughter echoing under the arbor, the look on her face when she walked down the aisle. Would she even want me there? Don't tell anyone. The words repeated in my mind like a harsh refrain. I reached my front door and halted. The dress hung limp in my hand now, as if it had never belonged to me. I swallowed the ache. I hadn't expected gratitude. I didn't even expect acknowledgement. But I had expected inclusion. A place, a role, a moment that said, this is your family too. Inside, May's old photographs lined the hallway, the ones she never bothers to dust. Her childhood portraits, our Christmas mornings, the day she graduated from high school. I paused in front of the black and white shot, where she hugged me so tight her face was hidden in my coat. I laid the dress on the staircase banister and said aloud, I'll be there. I just didn't know how yet. The florist called at 9:10, cheerful and precise. Mrs. Merritt, the white gardenias will arrive Friday, and the centerpieces by noon Saturday. Do you want the bride's bouquet delivered to the venue or her home? To the venue, I answered. Under whose name shall I invoice the remaining amount? I paused. Put it under Haley Carter, but charge it to the Merritt account. The line clicked as she confirmed the details. I hung up and stared at the notepad on the kitchen table. 3 names were circled: the florist, the caterer, the quartet. All of them booked by me, paid by me. I didn't mind. Not really. I had the money. Not vast wealth, but enough. Carefully saved, quietly protected, never flaunted. I had learned long ago how to stretch pennies, how to tighten a budget when my husband passed, and how to carry on when Haley was 5, and barely understood what absence meant. The wedding planning had started with urgency. Haley wanted it done within 5 months, said it fit his schedule better, said she didn't want to wait. I remember sitting across from her and nodding as she scrolled through venues and cakes and dress options. I wasn't invited into the decisions. I was only asked for the means. It was never, can you help? It was, this needs to be paid by Friday. But I said yes, because I always had. The cake alone, almond, layered with lemon mousse and sugar flowers, cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. The venue, an estate north of town, had a chandelier in the reception hall big enough to embarrass Versailles. The quartet was flown in from Portland. Everything glittered. Everything sparkled. Except my name. At the planning meeting, I signed the contracts quietly. When the decorator asked who was handling the financial arrangements, Haley smiled and said, "We're keeping it in the family." I nodded along, even as I realized I wasn't what she meant by we. She said it with her fiancé beside her. He's a corporate lawyer, polished, charming. He called me Mrs. Merritt, even after I told him he could use my first name. I don't think he liked that my nails were short and my shoes were plain, or that I asked questions about hidden fees. He and Haley fit well, if you looked from far away. From up close, I saw the silence between them when no one else was around. But maybe that was none of my business anymore. I left the agency office early that day and walked past the river where Haley used to feed ducks. I stopped and leaned on the rail, letting the breeze lift the hem of my coat. I wondered when I had been replaced, if it happened in one moment or gradually, in small pieces. She used to call me at midnight in college, asking if Tylenol could help a migraine. She used to send me voicemail recordings of her daughter's first words. Now she sent me invoices. I bought a pale lilac clutch on the way home. It matched the dress. Inside, I would carry tissues, mints, and a check. The same things I carried to her graduation. The same posture. Present, but invisible. That evening, the caterer called. "Mrs. Merritt, just confirming final guest count? 102? Yes. And your seating?" "I'm not assigned a table," I said. A beat of silence. "Oh, I'll make a note." "Don't," I said softly. "Just do as instructed." Because I understood the instructions now. They didn't need a mother. They needed a patron. And I was willing to be both. For now. When Haley was 9, she asked me if other girls' mothers worked night shifts too. We were sitting on the floor, folding laundry, and she was matching socks by pattern, like it was a puzzle game. "I don't think so," she said quietly. "Ashley's mom picks her up after school every day. She brings cupcakes on Fridays." I laughed. "Well, I'm no good at cupcakes." She didn't smile. I was a nurse back then, full-time, double shifts when they needed me, which was often. Our apartment was small, clean, and quiet. Haley had her own room, and I made sure she had everything: school books, lunch money, a warm coat every winter. Her father had died in a car accident when she was 4, and from that moment, it was just us. I told myself over and over that she would understand someday, that one day she would see that I had held it all up for her. But children don't see scaffolding. They only remember what the windows looked like. At parent-teacher nights, I wore the same pressed blouse and black slacks. Other mothers came in heels, with curled hair and leather purses. I came with notes in my hand, and a face still marked by a surgical mask line. One year, when Haley was 12, I caught her telling a friend that I worked downtown without specifying where. "Why didn't you say I'm a nurse?" I asked her later. She shrugged. "I don't know. It just sounded better." I didn't push it. I just went to the kitchen and made spaghetti. In high school, Haley excelled. Smart, disciplined, competitive. She got a scholarship to a private college 2 states away. I drove her there myself, in my 15-year-old car with one back window that wouldn't roll down. When we arrived, she jumped out quickly, already scanning the campus like she was trying to erase where she came from. "Let me help you with the boxes," I said. "It's okay, they have volunteers," she answered, already halfway down the walkway. That night, alone in a budget motel, I held her baby picture in my hand and stared at the curve of her cheek. I didn't cry. I had cried enough the first year after her father died. I had no tears left for distance earned honestly. Years passed. She became someone with clean lines and soft speech, someone who read legal documents without blinking, who corrected my grammar once in front of her colleagues. But I kept showing up. I paid for her internship apartment that summer in Chicago. I paid to fix her car when she rear-ended someone on the freeway. I sent her grocery money when the firm delayed her first paycheck. She never asked with entitlement. She always said, "I'll pay you back." She never did. And I never asked. Because some debts aren't about the money. They're about belief. About saying with action, "I still believe in you," even when they begin to believe less in you. The first time I realized she was embarrassed by me, really embarrassed, was when she called to say she couldn't make it to Thanksgiving. "We're going to my fiancé's parents," she said. "They live in the city?" "More or less." I found out later they were 15 miles away. I baked pie anyway. Apple, with a touch of lemon zest, the way she liked it when she was small. No one came to eat it. After that, we spoke less. Always polite, always transactional. Her voice had a cadence reserved for phone trees and customer service. So when she asked for help with the wedding, no warmth, no preamble, I said yes. Because I'd said yes to everything. Because I thought maybe, finally, this was the thing that would bring me back into the light of her affection. I never expected gratitude, but I also never expected shame. The morning before the wedding, I stood in the bathroom curling my hair for the first time in years. I wasn't very good at it anymore. My wrist stiffened with age, and the iron never clamped quite where I aimed. But I kept at it. The dress was laid across the bed, its soft lilac folds catching the early sun. I'd steamed it carefully the night before and polished the little clasp on the matching clutch. My low-heeled shoes sat by the door. All that remained was the invitation. Only it hadn't come. I checked the mail again, just in case. Still nothing. A flyer, a utility bill, a coupon for a carpet service I didn't need. I picked up my phone, opened my email, then my texts. Nothing from Haley. No forwarded details, no reminder. Just the same string of logistical updates from the planner weeks ago, all dry and impersonal. At 9, I called the venue. I didn't say who I was, just asked for the ceremony. Start time. 3 o'clock, ma'am, the receptionist answered. Reception follows at 6. Please check in at the guest table upon arrival. Guest table. Maybe they didn't send physical invitations. Maybe everything was digital. Maybe she assumed I would just come. Or maybe she hadn't wanted to send one. I stared at my reflection. My lipstick was soft coral, subtle. I wore it the day Haley graduated college. She told me I looked neat. Not beautiful, just neat. On the counter, I'd laid out a tiny envelope with a handwritten card and a check inside. The handwriting was deliberate. I'd practiced it. To Haley and Carter. For the beginning you deserve. I didn't write love, Mom. I just signed it JM. I told myself it was to be understated. Tasteful. But if I was honest, I didn't want to give her anything that could be quoted out loud. Not if she was pretending I wasn't her mother. I made a cup of tea, but it sat cooling beside me as I wandered the house. I touched the bookshelf she helped me paint when she was 12. I opened the coat closet and saw her old rain boots, bright yellow, size 3, still lined with faded pink fleece. They made me smile, and then they made me ache. At noon, I sat on the edge of my bed in my slip, dress still untouched beside me, and stared at the silence. Was it possible to love someone so completely and still not be welcome at the most important day of their life? I told myself she was stressed, that details had slipped, that someone else had forgotten to include me. But somewhere inside, I felt the truth sitting there, calm and heavy. She had meant it when she said, "Don't tell anyone you're my mom." That wasn't about timing or etiquette. That was identity. And identity didn't get lost in the mail. I stood up and zipped myself into the dress. The fabric felt smooth, kind, like it didn't care who I was. I applied a little more powder, adjusted the pearl studs in my ears, and wrapped the soft gray shawl around my shoulders. I looked like someone's mother, just not hers, apparently. Still, I would go. Because not everything we do is for the person who's forgotten us. Sometimes we show up to remind ourselves we're still real. The parking lot was almost full by the time I arrived. Shiny cars gleamed under the soft spring sun, lined up like guests themselves, polished, prepared, carefully chosen. My Toyota looked out of place among them, but I didn't mind. It had carried me through harder days than this. The estate grounds were picture perfect. Ivy-covered arches, stone steps, delicate signs directing guests toward the ceremony lawn. Everyone I passed was dressed just right. Sleek fabrics, expensive shoes, hair caught in elegant arrangements. I walked slower than most, letting them pass, letting them not notice me. At the top of the steps, a young woman in a headset smiled and asked, "Name, please." I hesitated. "June Merritt." She scanned her list, frowning lightly. "I don't seem to have you here. Are you with the bride or groom?" I looked past her toward the lawn, where white chairs were arranged in neat rows. "I'm the bride's family," I said quietly. She nodded, still unsure. "You can wait just off to the side for now." I stepped aside, my heart drumming a strange rhythm. Guests were laughing and greeting each other. I saw Carter in the distance, greeting someone's uncle with a firm handshake. I didn't see Haley. Then I felt a hand on my elbow. A familiar perfume reached me first, white jasmine and something citrus. Haley's scent. She was standing beside me before I could speak. "Mom," she said. Not loudly, not warmly. Just the word, like it was a problem to be solved. I smiled. "Hello, sweetheart. You look—" "We need to talk," she cut in quickly. "Come with me." She led me away from the crowd, toward a gravel path shaded by birch trees. Her heels crunched sharply on the stones. Mine moved softer, uncertain. When we were out of earshot, she stopped and turned. Her eyes scanned me, then the dress. "You wore the lilac one." "You said it suited the setting," I said. I meant it lightly. She didn't smile. "I thought you weren't coming," she said flatly. "There was no RSVP." "There was no invitation," I replied. She sighed, rubbing the space between her brows. "It wasn't personal. We tried to keep it small and it's complicated, okay?" "Haley," I said gently, "I've paid for most of this wedding." "I know," she whispered, "and I'm grateful, truly. But Carter's family is very particular. His parents are here. They're friends. They're used to a certain kind of—" She stopped herself. "Kind of what?" I asked, quietly. She avoided my eyes, and then she said it. "Just don't tell anyone you're my mom, okay?" I stared at her. The world slowed. The breeze that had seemed warm before now felt cold against my arms. "I'm sorry," she added quickly. "It's not that I'm ashamed. This isn't the time for complicated things. I need everything to go smoothly." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. "I'll make it up to you," she said. "Maybe we can have dinner next week. Just us. But today, please, just be discreet. Don't correct anyone. Don't say anything." My throat burned, but I swallowed it. I looked down at my shoes. "You're asking me to be invisible," I said. "I'm asking you to be kind," she answered. "Just this once. Just this once. As if there hadn't been 100 other times." I nodded. "Of course," I said. Because what else does a mother say when her child has already made the choice? She looked relieved. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she walked back toward the others. Shoulders straight, hair perfect, face glowing. I stood there alone under the birch trees, the wind moving softly through the leaves, the sound of laughter rising behind me. In my hand, the envelope with the gift still felt warm from my palm. I didn't cry. I simply walked back the way I came, one careful step after another, like a woman who had learned how to walk through fire without leaving ashes behind. The photographer didn't mean to capture the moment. He was adjusting the lens, pacing backward toward the grove where I stood, his eye caught in the rhythm of candid shots. Guests greeting, children fidgeting, bridesmaids adjusting sashes. He hadn't seen Haley's face when she said it. He hadn't heard her whisper. But he caught the way her hand gripped my elbow, the tension in my posture, the way I looked not at her, but just past her, somewhere far behind. Click. And just like that, it was recorded. He smiled politely as he turned. "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to intrude. You two looked very connected." Haley laughed lightly, already walking away. I managed a small nod. I don't know if he sensed anything. Maybe later, as he sorted the shots, he'd notice the tilt of my body or the way her fingers pressed too tightly into my sleeve. Maybe he wouldn't. I stood still for a few more seconds, letting the weight of the conversation settle inside me like stones in a river. Then I turned and walked quietly down the side path, away from the music, the chairs, the sound of string instruments warming up. No one stopped me. No one looked twice. At the parking lot, my car was where I'd left it, dull gray among glossy chrome. I unlocked it, slid in, and sat with the door ajar, letting air wash over me. The dress had creased at the waist. I smoothed it with one hand, mechanically. My hands didn't shake. They should have, I suppose. That's what people imagine when mothers are rejected. Shaking hands, wailing hearts, public tears. But the hurt in me didn't rise up. It settled. Deep. Solid. Like something that had always been waiting to happen. The check was still in my clutch. I looked at it now, folded with care, written with ink that didn't smudge. To Haley and Carter, it said. It didn't matter if I added with love. The money didn't carry the sentiment. I placed the envelope on the passenger seat. For a moment, I considered driving home. Then I drove instead to the edge of town. There, in a quiet cafe near the lake, I sat with a cup of coffee and no appetite. The waitress asked if I wanted cream. I said no, and she didn't ask why. Outside, couples walked dogs. A toddler pointed at ducks. The world moved on, unbothered by a wedding, by a mother dismissed, by a dress worn for someone who didn't want to see it. I stayed there for over an hour. I thought of Haley's face as a child, the way she used to braid my hair for fun, how she'd crawl into my bed on stormy nights and whisper, "Don't let go." Now she said the opposite. "Don't hold on. Don't say who you are. Don't remind me of the parts of myself I no longer want to be seen." At some point, I realized I still had the photographer's card. He'd handed them out earlier, each one stamped with Timothy Stokes Studio in neat gold letters. On a whim, I called the number. "Hello, this is Tim," the voice said after 2 rings. "Hello, Mr. Stokes," I said. "This is June Merritt. I believe you just photographed a wedding at the Grantham estate?" "Yes, of course. Beautiful day for it." I'd like to pay for the album, I said simply. All of it. I believe the bride arranged for a basic package. Please upgrade it to full editorial. Include every image, especially the candids. There was a pause. Certainly. And the delivery address? I gave him mine. Do you want me to send a proof gallery to the couple first? No, I said. Just finish it as you see fit. He hesitated, then said, Understood. I hung up. The album would arrive in 3 weeks, maybe 4. I didn't know if Haley would ever ask about it. I doubted she'd notice. But I would have it. I would hold it. I would remember. The house was quiet when I returned, but not peacefully so. It had the hush of something abandoned, like a church after service, faint perfume in the air, forgotten tissues in the pew. I left the dress on the back of a chair and sat down at the kitchen table without turning on any lights. The silence felt necessary. For a long moment, I just stared at my hands. The left one bore the faint imprint of my wedding ring, worn away years ago when I stopped needing its comfort. The right one rested lightly on my phone. Then I picked it up and called the bank. Thank you for calling Ashland Savings, the voice said cheerfully. How can I help you today? I'd like to speak to someone about recent scheduled payments, I said. My voice surprised me, low, steady, with no tremble. Certainly. I'll connect you with our personal accounts team. A pause, a soft click, then a new voice. Male, warm, efficient. Mrs. Merritt, this is Paul. What can I do for you today? I need to stop a series of payments, large ones, related to a private event. I named the caterer, the florist, the decorator, the estate. He listened without interruption. May I ask the reason for the cancellations? He said gently, like someone trying not to step on a wound. There's been a change in circumstance, I replied, and I no longer wish to finance them. He paused. Some of these payments are scheduled to finalize overnight. If we act now, we can intercept most of them. I'd like you to do that. He continued typing, then said, Done. You'll see funds released back into your account within the next 48 hours. I exhaled slowly. One more thing, I said. I'd like to open a separate trust for my granddaughter. Her name is Sophie Merritt. Of course. Do you have an age in mind for disbursement? 25, I said. Or sooner, if she's in school or facing hardship. He paused again. That's very thoughtful. It's overdue, I said. We completed the paperwork by phone as far as we could. I would sign the rest at the branch the next morning. Anything else I can help you with, Mrs. Merritt? No, I said. You've been more helpful than most people in my family today. He chuckled, not unkindly. Well, we try our best. I ended the call and sat back. The kitchen clock ticked steadily. On the fridge was a picture Sophie had drawn years ago, her and me, stick figures holding ice cream, under a sky of crooked blue stars. Her mother never liked that drawing, said it made us look poor. I left it up anyway. I picked up the envelope from the car, the one with the wedding gift. Carefully, I opened it and removed the check. I tore it into 4 slow, precise pieces and dropped them in the wastebasket. Then I opened the freezer and pulled out a container of soup. Split pea. Haley hated it as a child. Sophie still loved it. I heated a bowl, ate it slowly. Every spoonful felt like a return to something, not bitterness, not even grief, just autonomy. I had lived so long reacting to Haley's needs that I'd forgotten how it felt to choose my own. Later, I called the event agency. A woman answered. Young voice, nervous edge. This is Meredith from Arcadia Events. This is June Merritt. I'm calling about the Grantham wedding. Yes, ma'am, she said. Everything's progressing on schedule. Is there anything you'd like to confirm? I'm canceling the payments, I said. Silence. Then a brittle laugh. Sorry, what? You heard me. But the event is already in motion, and so is my decision. There was rustling, then a different voice came on. Older. Mrs. Merritt, this is Elise, the managing coordinator. Are you saying you wish to pull funding? I already have. Check with your bank contacts. Another pause. Then quietly, may I ask what happened? No need, I said. Just let the couple know their benefactor has withdrawn support. They can explain it however they like. Elise hesitated. We'll notify the vendors. Some services may continue out of contract obligation, but I understand. And I ended the call. For the first time in decades, I had made a decision entirely for myself, without asking what anyone else needed from me first. The air in the house changed. Lighter, maybe. Not happier, but clearer. Like something that had been hanging in the corners had finally gone. The bank opened at 9. I was already waiting by 8:30, seated on the wooden bench outside with a coffee I didn't finish and a folder tucked under my coat. The morning was cool, still damp from last night's rain, and the glass doors reflected my face back at me, lined, quiet, unmistakably steady. I didn't feel triumphant. I wasn't interested in revenge. What I felt was closer to resolve, like putting a heavy suitcase down after carrying it too many miles. When the security guard unlocked the front doors, I stood and stepped inside. Good morning, the young teller greeted me. I have an appointment with Paul, I said. About the trust account. She smiled. He's expecting you. Right this way. Paul looked a bit surprised to see me so early, but he stood, shook my hand, and led me to his office. It smelled like printer paper and citrus wipes, the kind of sterile comfort that meant nothing and everything at once. Everything's in place, he said, pulling up files on his screen. The payments were stopped in time. One deposit went through, but it's reversible. The trust draft is ready, just needs your signature. He handed me a printed copy. I read every line, not because I distrusted him, but because I wanted to know exactly what I was giving and to whom. Sophie Merritt, my granddaughter, my only real person in this entire mess, who had looked at me again and again as if I were someone to run toward, not away from. The trust would be modest but solid. Enough to help her through college. Enough to make a choice, any choice, without bargaining with guilt. And if something happens to me before she's of age? I asked. We've built in a secondary clause, he said. It becomes irrevocable and is managed by a third-party custodian until she turns 25. Good, I said. I signed each page slowly, carefully. The pen left a clean blue line across paper that had only ever known my signature in contexts of giving, co-signing loans, wiring tuition, opening joint accounts for people who used me like scaffolding. This one was different. This one was mine. When it was done, Paul slid a copy into a neat folder and handed it to me. She's lucky, he said, meaning it. She's kind, I answered. That's different than lucky. I left the bank and walked 2 blocks to the legal office that had handled my will years ago. The secretary, a woman I hadn't seen since she was pregnant with her second child, looked up and smiled. Mrs. Merritt, it's been a while. I'd like to update my estate documents, I said. Of course, she nodded. I'll see if Mr. Vernon is free. He was. Older now, heavier around the eyes but sharp as ever. He offered me water, which I declined, then sat behind his wide oak desk and listened. I need to remove one beneficiary, I said, and add protections around the trust I created this morning. Understood, he said, without asking why. The good ones never do. We went through the updates methodically. Haley's name came off the primary inheritance. A clause was added to prevent challenge. The wording was clean, not bitter, just final. I initialed each change. Afterward, I stood at the curb and watched the street for a long time. Cars passing, people moving, lives being lived. All of them detached from mine. Then I walked into a small bakery and bought myself a single lemon tart. No reason, no occasion. I hadn't had one since before Haley was born. I took it home, brewed a cup of strong tea, and sat by the window. The house was still. Not empty, just quiet in the way a place is when it's no longer stretched thin, trying to impress anyone. I pulled out the wedding program. I'd found it folded in my car door pocket after I left the venue. It listed the bridal party, the parents of the groom, a vague mention of family and friends on the bride's side. My name was nowhere. I folded it in half, then in half again. Then I slid it into the fireplace. It burned without resistance. Later, I dialed Sophie's number. She didn't answer, likely at the reception or asleep after the day's whirlwind. So I left a message. "Hi, darling. Just wanted to hear your voice. No rush to call back. I'll be home, always." I paused. "And Sophie, one day, when the time comes, you'll understand why I did things the way I did. I just hope, when you do, you'll still think of me with love." I hung up. Then I reached for the lemon tart, took a bite, and let the sharp sweetness settle on my tongue. It tasted like something I hadn't known I missed. The knock came just after 7. I hadn't expected anyone, certainly not that night, not after everything. I was still in my house sweater, the lemon tart plate in the sink, the tea long gone cold. When I opened the door, Sophie stood there. She was still in her bridesmaid dress, dusty rose silk, creased now around the waist, a strand of hair fallen loose from her updo. She looked tired in the way young people rarely do. Real tired, soul-deep tired. But her eyes were clear. "Grandma," she said. I stepped aside without a word, and she walked in like she'd done 100 times before. She sat at the table. Same chair she always chose, the one closest to the window. She didn't touch her phone, didn't fidget, just looked at me. "I tried calling," she said. "I turned it off," I replied. She nodded, like she understood. Then, softer. "It was a mess. You probably already know." I didn't answer. She continued. "The food didn't show up. The music cut out halfway through the reception. The manager pulled Carter aside and asked for a card, said the booking wasn't finalized." Still, I said nothing. I poured her a glass of water instead and set it gently in front of her. Sophie traced the rim with one finger. Mom didn't know what to say. She told people it was a vendor mistake. Carter was furious. I looked at her. "And you?" She took a long breath. I was embarrassed. For them. There it was. I sat across from her. The lamp above us buzzed faintly. Outside, wind moved through the trees. In here, it felt like time had stopped. "She told me what she said to you," Sophie whispered. "Not directly. But I asked why you weren't sitting with us." She brushed it off. Said it was just complicated family stuff. "But I saw your face, Grandma, right after she pulled you aside. I saw it." I stared at the tablecloth. Pale linen, a faint tea stain in the corner. It had been Haley's favorite when she was little. She used to trace the embroidered flowers with her fork while I told her bedtime stories at dinner. Sophie reached across the table, touched my hand lightly. "I'm so sorry." I shook my head. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Still," she said, "it wasn't right. And I don't know what's going to happen now, but I wanted to come see you." I couldn't go to bed knowing I hadn't. My fingers curled gently around hers. I didn't cancel the payments to punish her, I said. I need you to understand that. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. For the first time in years, I saw things plain. Sophie nodded slowly. She's always been complicated with you. I never understood why. Because I reminded her of where she came from, I said simply. And some people spend their whole lives trying to outgrow their beginnings, like they're shameful. But roots don't disappear just because you dress up the branches. She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "They're angry, Mom and Carter. I heard them talking when they thought I was out of earshot. They feel humiliated, exposed. I imagine they do. She said you undermined her, that you embarrassed her." I looked up, meeting Sophie's eyes. "What do you think?" She didn't flinch. "I think she embarrassed herself." I wanted to cry then, not from pain, but from relief, from the quiet, steady presence of someone who saw, who had always seen, even if she didn't have the words before. I stood and opened the cupboard, pulling out the small tin of sugar cookies Sophie liked since she was little. The ones with too much powdered sugar and uneven edges. I set the tin down. She smiled. "You didn't have to come tonight," I said. "I did," she replied. "I didn't want you to think you were alone." I poured us both tea. We drank in silence. When she left, she hugged me hard. Not like a child clinging, and not like a guest saying goodbye, but like someone anchoring both of us to something solid. At the door, she paused. "Can I come tomorrow? Help you with the garden?" I smiled. "I'd like that." After she left, I stood for a long time in the hallway, listening to the quiet tick of the clock and the wind in the trees. Not lonely, just still. I turned off the porch light. Whatever happened next, I would be fine. The call came just after 9 the next morning. I was in the backyard, digging shallow rows for marigolds, the soil still cool from dawn. My gloves were dusty, my knees sore, and the phone buzzed against my hip with that stubborn insistence only family seems to summon. I didn't answer right away. I finished the row first, patted it down, then sat back on my heels before pulling off one glove and checking the screen. Haley. I let it ring out once. Then again. The third time, I picked up. "Hello." Her voice came sharp, tight, the kind of tone that's already halfway through a sentence before the greeting. "Why didn't you tell me you were pulling the funding?" I stood slowly, brushed dirt from my palms. "Good morning to you, too." "Mom," she said, lowering her voice like someone nearby might be listening. "Do you have any idea what kind of scene you caused?" I didn't cause anything. I stopped paying for something I was asked to keep quiet about. That's not sabotage, Haley. That's silence becoming self-respect. "I trusted you," she said. "I asked you to keep things discreet. You said you would. I did keep it discreet. You're the one who put me on the sidelines, remember?" There was a pause. I heard her exhale, sharp through the receiver. "You embarrassed me." "No, Haley. You did that when you asked me not to tell people I was your mother. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant." Her voice rose slightly. "Do you know how hard I worked to make that day perfect? And you—" "Haley," I interrupted gently. "Did you even notice I left?" That stopped her. I could hear the gears turning. The pause was longer this time. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe she was too caught up in the wine and the speeches and the photographers. "I noticed," she said finally. "Eventually." I waited. She added, "It wasn't the time to have a conversation. And yet, you made time to ask me not to be your mother, to my face, at your wedding. That's not fair." It's not? She was quiet. I stepped back into the kitchen, the phone resting on my shoulder, the sun painting stripes across the tiled floor. You've spent years drawing lines, Haley, I said, between where you're going and where you came from. And I've stepped back every time. I told myself it was maturity, independence, progress. But I see now. It was distance. Chosen, curated, and measured. And I'm done paying the toll for that. I didn't mean for it to come to this, she said, quieter now. But it has. What do you want from me? She asked. An apology? A public scene? You want me to tell Carter's family I was wrong? No, I said. I want nothing from you, not anymore. That's the point. She scoffed. That's rich. After everything I've asked of you, now you decide you're the victim? I'm not a victim, Haley. I'm just done pretending I'm welcome in a house where I'm only useful if I'm invisible. Another long silence. You didn't even say goodbye. I didn't need to, I said. You'd already said it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice trying hard to regain control, she said, You've made your choice, clearly, and I'll respect it. But you've burned a bridge that won't rebuild easy. I know, I said. She hung up. I placed the phone face down on the counter and stood in the middle of the kitchen, letting the quiet return. Then I turned back to the garden. I had marigolds to finish, and an afternoon still my own. The package arrived on Thursday, 4 days after the wedding. It came in a square, flat box wrapped in heavy brown paper with a gold sticker on the corner. Timothy Stokes Studio. No note, no call, just the box, resting neatly on my porch like any other delivery. I brought it inside and set it on the table, staring at it for a long time. I wasn't sure I wanted to open it, not because I feared what was inside, but because I already knew. Still, I fetched the scissors, sliced through the tape, and lifted the lid. Inside was a dark gray album, cloth-bound, the kind that whispered permanence with its weight. I placed it on the table and opened to the first page. The cover image was expected. Haley and Carter walking hand in hand through the garden path, sunlight filtering through the trees, her veil caught midair like something divine. I turned the page. The ceremony, rows of smiling guests, the minister's hands raised mid-blessing, Haley's face as she glanced at Carter. All perfect, all planned. Then came the candids. I don't know if Timothy understood what he captured, but he had the eye of someone who listens without asking. There it was, a shot of Haley reaching for my elbow, her fingers tight around my arm, her mouth close to my ear. Another of my face, slightly turned, expression unreadable. I was wearing the lilac dress. You could see the soft shawl around my shoulders, the pearls at my neck. You could also see distance, unmistakable, intimate, but cold. I turned the page. The guests laughing, toasting, plates of food untouched. Then the reception, images that should have been joyful. But if you looked closely, really looked, you'd see the tension in Haley's shoulders, the forced smile on Carter's face. In one frame, Sophie is in the corner, looking toward the empty chair where I should have been. Page after page, the album unfolded like a story no one meant to tell. A beautiful day, polished on the surface, but frayed around the edges. It wasn't vengeful. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. Toward the end was a photo I hadn't expected. Sophie and me standing near the trees before the ceremony. She must have followed me when I started walking away. In the photo, I'm mid-step, one hand raised to adjust my shawl. Sophie is behind me, reaching, not touching, just reaching. It was a quiet picture, but it caught something no toast or dance could replicate. Connection. Generational. Undeniable. I closed the album gently. No tears came. I had cried enough over years in silence, in moments when no one saw. This time I just sat with it. The record, the evidence, the proof. I didn't plan to show it to Haley. I didn't plan to show it to anyone, really. But I would keep it. Not out of spite, not to relive pain, but because for once, the record showed the truth. I tucked the album back into its box, sealed it lightly, and carried it to the hallway cabinet. Not hidden, not displayed, just placed. A document, a marker. The kind of thing someone might find one day and understand more than words ever could. That evening, I made a simple dinner, grilled vegetables and rice. I watched the light fade behind the trees and let the quiet settle deep around me. I wasn't waiting for calls anymore. I wasn't checking for messages. I wasn't listening for apologies that would never come. I had my name. I had my truth. And now I had the album. Sophie came by Sunday morning, just like she said she would. She was in jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose knot, holding a paper bag with 2 still warm scones and a folded newspaper. I opened the door before she could knock. "You always know," she smiled. "Old habit," I said. "I used to listen for your mother's footsteps too, when she still lived here." She didn't answer that, just stepped inside and placed the bag on the counter. We ate in the kitchen, sunlight filling the room in slow strokes. She spread butter on her scone like she'd done as a little girl, meticulously, all the way to the edges. Her quiet care in that simple act felt like balm. "I like it here," she said. "Your house feels like everything stayed in one place." "Sometimes it did," I said. "Other times it only looked that way." After breakfast, we moved to the garden. The marigolds had settled in their rows. Sophie knelt beside me and dug with her hands, not minding the soil under her nails. She asked about each plant. I told her the stories, how some had come from clippings, others from seeds given to me by neighbors long gone. She listened like none of it bored her. That was new. Around noon, I stood to stretch my back. Sophie wiped her forehead and said, "You never told me you liked working out here so much." "I didn't think anyone needed to know," I said. "I used to come out here after double shifts at the hospital. It was the only quiet I had." She looked around. "No wonder you kept it." Later, we sat on the porch with glasses of cold tea, shoes off, our feet resting on the worn wooden steps. The air smelled of lavender and cut grass. I hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. She turned to me and asked, "Can I ask something?" "Always." "Why did you really stop the payments? I mean, not just the surface reason, not the hurt." "I know that part. But why now? After everything? Why not just walk away quietly, like always?" I thought for a moment, then answered slowly. "Because something shifted. Not just in her, but in me. For a long time, I believed love meant staying useful. That if I just kept giving, eventually it would be enough. But standing there, in that dress, being told not to call myself her mother, I realized I was part of my own erasure. Sophie didn't flinch. She just watched me. "I didn't want to punish her," I said. "I wanted to stop participating in my own disappearance." She nodded once, then twice. "I think you did the right thing." "It didn't feel brave," I said. "It just felt necessary." She was quiet a while. Then she reached into her canvas bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue, small, square. "I made you something," she said, almost shy. I unwrapped it carefully. It was a hand-painted tile in soft colors, lilac and cream, my garden, and on it, in neat lettering, "You were always seen." I swallowed hard. Sophie, I whispered. She reached over and took my hand. I saw you, even when she didn't. I saw you. The wind moved through the trees then, soft and certain, like an answer. We sat there until the light shifted, until the day bent into afternoon and the sky deepened into a pale blue stretch of quiet. She didn't need to stay longer. The gift was already made. And I knew as I looked at her walking down the path toward her car that I would never again believe I had vanished. I had roots, and they had bloomed. She showed up 3 days later. No call, no warning. Just her car pulling up the drive like it used to when she was 23 and between jobs, still unsure of herself, still willing to be vulnerable. Only now she stepped out of the car with that clipped grace she'd perfected. Heels too tall for gravel, coat too smooth for spring wind. She didn't knock. Just opened the gate, walked through the garden, and stood at my back door like she wasn't sure what she'd come to find. I was shelling peas at the kitchen table. When I looked up and saw her silhouette through the screen, I didn't move right away. She opened the door without asking. Hi, she said. Haley. She glanced around like she was checking for someone else. You're not screening my calls? I turned off the ringer. Peace is expensive. I'm trying not to waste it. She gave a short breath of something between a laugh and a sigh. May I sit? I nodded. She sat across from me, knees tight together, hands folded, lips pressed. Everything about her said control, except her eyes. Her eyes were too wide. I didn't come to fight, she said. Good, I said. I'm not offering one. She looked down at the peas on the table, picked one up, rolled it between her fingers like it might help her find the words. Why didn't you just talk to me? She asked. Before pulling out of the payments, before freezing the accounts, before whatever this is now. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward. I simply said, I'd been talking to you for 30 years, Haley. You just stopped listening. She swallowed. Hard. But she didn't interrupt. You asked me to be part of something, I continued, but only in the ways that were convenient. You wanted the money, the help, the support, but not the presence, not the truth of me. I didn't mean it like that, she said quickly. The wedding, it was complicated. No, I said. It was clear. You asked me not to tell anyone I was your mother. That wasn't about stress. That was about shame. Her shoulders stiffened. That's not fair. It's not kind either, but it's true. She stood abruptly, walked to the window, arms folded. I built something, she said. A life, a career, a place in the world, and sometimes I didn't know how to fit you into it. That's not the same as being ashamed. You didn't need to fit me, I said. You just needed to let me be. She turned to me, her voice shaking. You have no idea how hard I worked to keep things from falling apart. You think I married for comfort? I married because I was tired of drowning. I built my life on order because all I remember from childhood is you crying at the kitchen sink and bills we couldn't pay. I said nothing. You think I forgot who you are? She whispered. I remember every night you stayed awake while I was sick. Every shift you picked up when we couldn't afford heating. I remember how your hands looked after 15 hours in latex gloves. I looked at her then. Really looked. Then why? I asked gently. Did you want to hide me? She sat back down slowly. Because if I let the truth of you into that room, she said, I was afraid I'd lose what I built. And did you? She shook her head. No, but I lost something else. We sat there in silence. I'm not here for forgiveness, she said finally. I'm not even sure I deserve it. I'm not offering it like a reward, I replied. I'm offering it like a boundary. You don't get to take me in pieces anymore, Haley. I'm whole, whether you choose to see it or not. She nodded, almost like she'd expected it, maybe even needed to hear it. She stood again. I don't know what comes next. Then take your time, I said. But don't come back with apologies wrapped in expectations. I've run out of room for performance. At the door, she paused. Did Sophie tell you she's applying to the art program? She did, I said. She'll be fine. She told me she wants to move in with you for a while. She's welcome, I said. She always has been. Haley looked like she might cry then, but didn't. She just nodded, opened the door, and left. And this time, I didn't watch her drive away. Sophie arrived on a Tuesday with 2 suitcases and a canvas tote full of books. She parked carefully, like she didn't want to disturb the gravel. When I opened the door, she grinned in that quiet way she had, not flashy, not forced, just real. Are you sure? She asked, standing on the porch, hands curled around the strap of the tote. I was sure before you asked, I said. We carried her things inside. She chose the back bedroom, the one with the softer light, the windows that opened wide to the garden. I offered clean sheets and space in the dresser. She unpacked like someone who knew how to live gently. Neatly folded sweaters, a jar of brushes, a little wooden box of drawing pencils. That first evening, she made dinner. Pasta with olive oil, garlic, and greens she picked herself from the raised beds. She moved around my kitchen like it had always been hers. No fuss, no apology. I like the quiet here, she said. It listens, I replied. We ate on the porch. The sun stretched low across the yard, catching the tops of the marigolds. She told me about the portfolio she was building, showed me a few of her sketches, soft lines, bold choices. I saw myself in the structure. I saw her mother in the precision, but mostly I saw her. That night, after she went to bed, I stood outside her door and listened. No crying, no phone calls, just the sound of pages turning. The next morning, she joined me in the garden. I gave her gloves that didn't quite fit and a trowel with a cracked handle. She didn't complain, just knelt in the dirt and asked what needed pruning. Start with what's dead, I said. Then what's crowding the others. She smiled. There's a metaphor in there somewhere. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Days passed in a rhythm I hadn't known I missed. We shopped together. Simple groceries, fresh eggs, a new bag of soil. We folded laundry while a radio played old songs. We talked sometimes, but not always. The silence between us was never heavy. One afternoon, she painted by the kitchen window. I watched from the hallway as she moved her brush in slow arcs, the tip barely touching the paper. She didn't notice me. Later, she left the painting on my chair, a soft image of the back garden, shadows falling just so, light captured like breath. I didn't want it to be perfect, she said. I wanted it to feel familiar. It did. One evening, we baked a pie. The old kind. Apple with lemon zest and cinnamon. My recipe, her hands. She peeled the apples slowly, like it mattered. When it was done, we ate it warm, with spoons and no plates. Mom texted, she said after a while. Oh? She asked if I was okay. I said yes. I didn't ask more. She didn't offer more. The next morning, I found a note on the fridge. Gone to library. Back for lunch. P.S. Marigolds look taller today. I smiled as I boiled the kettle. There was no ceremony to this new life. No declaration, no promises. Just the steady return of something I hadn't known I'd lost. Company without condition. Presence without pressure. Some nights, she sat cross-legged on the living room rug, sketching while I read. Other nights, we watched old films. She asked about my childhood once. I told her about summer walks to the river, my mother's hands braiding my hair, the day I got my first pair of shoes that weren't hand-me-downs. She listened like it mattered. Once, she asked, "Do you miss her?" "My mother?" She nodded. "Sometimes," I said. "Sometimes not." She didn't press. I liked that about her. There was no performance in our days. No need to explain, justify, or protect. Just breath. Just room. Just the faint sound of roots settling deeper into soil they finally trusted. Sophie stayed through spring. By the time the lilacs bloomed, she had found a part-time job at the bookstore down the hill and started mailing her applications to art programs out of state. She came home with ink on her hands and stories about customers who mispronounced Camus. I listened. I always listened. But now she offered too. Stories, laughter, the weight of her day laid down without hesitation. One afternoon, we took down the old curtains in the front room and replaced them with linen ones she found at a thrift shop. They let the light in differently, softer, like the room had exhaled. Haley didn't visit. Once, she left a voice message, just her voice, stiff and rehearsed. Something about processing things. I didn't call back. There was nothing to process. There was only life, continuing. I didn't hate her. I don't have room for hate anymore. Just memory. Just choice. I watered the garden. I fed the birds. I read new books and reread old ones. Some days I missed who Haley used to be, before ambition turned to distance, before silence became policy. But I didn't miss who I had to become just to stay near her. Sophie called me home. She said it once, offhand, while locking the front door. "I'll be back by 6, Grandma. Don't start dinner without me. I'm bringing home bread. See you at home?" It landed softly, like something long deserved finally arriving. I had never asked to be anyone's home, but when it came freely, it felt like light on skin that had gone too long without sun. One morning, I pulled out a notebook. Just an ordinary spiral one. I began writing. Not letters, not confessions, just pages. Fragments, memories, recipes, truths. I didn't write for Haley, I wrote for Sophie, or someone like her. A woman who might one day forget that she comes from someone strong, someone who endured not for glory, but for love. Quiet, constant love. In the last pages, I wrote this. You don't need to be what they expect. You don't need to shrink to keep the peace. Speak clearly. Walk softly if you like, but never erase your own name to fit in someone else's picture. Love, yes, but love with your whole self, not just the parts they applaud. And when you feel forgotten, come home, to the earth, to the work of your own hands, to a kitchen that smells like something sweet. You are not invisible, not ever. Sophie read it, quietly. She didn't cry. She just hugged me and said, "This is what I'll keep." I nodded. That evening, we sat outside with tea. The sun dipped low, and the garden was loud with bees. I thought of everything I'd held inside for so many years. The silence I'd called grace. The effort I'd mistaken for love. The patience that had nearly undone me. And I thought of now. Of Sophie's bare feet in the grass. Of my own voice, steady and unafraid. Of the album in the cabinet. The tile on the wall. Of marigolds blooming despite the frost. You don't need a crowd to know you exist. You don't need applause to be whole. You just need someone to see you and to see yourself when they can't. And if you've read this far, maybe it's time you wrote your own ending, or your own beginning. Quietly, yes, but fully. No permission needed.